There are moments in history when a single event compresses decades of strategic calculation into a single hour. When the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor destroyed the USS Arizona in 1941, it did not merely sink a battleship, it ended an era of American isolationism and rewrote the strategic architecture of the 20th century in the space of a morning. What happened in the Eastern Mediterranean in the last 3 hours is not Pearl Harbor, but it is the closest thing to it that the world has seen since December 7, 1941. An Iranian ballistic missile has struck the USS Gerald R. America's most powerful, most expensive, and most strategically significant warship is on fire. And the question that every government on Earth is now asking, the question that will define the next decade of global security, is whether the United States responds in a way that ends this conflict or in a way that begins a much larger one. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not merely a warship in the conventional sense. It is the physical embodiment of American military supremacy, the most concentrated expression of the United States' ability to project lethal force anywhere on Earth at any time. At 100,000 tons of displacement, it is the largest warship ever built by any nation in the history of human civilization. Its flight deck covers 4.5 acres. It carries approximately 90 fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters, including FA-18 Super Hornets, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, E-2D Advanced Hawkeye command and control platforms, and F-35C stealth fighters. Its electromagnetic launch system can send an aircraft into the sky every 45 seconds. Its total construction cost of $13 billion exceeds the entire annual military budget of most nations on Earth. When the Gerald R. Ford deploys to a region, it does not merely change the military balance. It announces, in terms that require no translation, that the United States has decided that this region matters enough to commit its most powerful military asset. Iran just put a missile into it. Here is what the strike sequence looked like based on the information now being assembled from U.S. Navy damage control reports, satellite imagery, and the accounts of personnel aboard the carrier and its escort vessels. At 14:23 local time, the Ford's integrated air defense system, so the most sophisticated shipborne air defense architecture ever deployed, combining AN/SPY-6 radar, Standard Missile-6 interceptors, rolling airframe missiles, and close-in weapon systems, detected an inbound ballistic missile threat classified as a Kheibar Shekan variant on a terminal descent trajectory. The combat systems officer had approximately 11 seconds from detection to impact. 2 SM-6 interceptors were fired in rapid succession. The first interceptor missed. The second interceptor achieved a partial intercept, striking the incoming warhead, but failing to achieve a complete kinetic kill, producing what Navy damage control terminology calls a debris event rather than a clean intercept. The partially destroyed warhead and its fragmented casing impacted the flight deck at the forward elevator area, producing an explosion that killed 11 sailors instantly, ignited aviation fuel in the forward fuel transfer system, and caused structural damage to the flight deck surface and the elevator mechanism that connects the hangar bay to the flight deck. The Ford is not sinking, but it is not operational, and the distinction between those two facts is the entire story of what happens next. To understand why Iran chose this target at this moment, you need to understand the strategic logic that has governed Iranian military planning. Since the United States first positioned carrier strike groups in the Persian Gulf as a deterrent against Iranian aggression in the 1990s, for 30 years, the aircraft carrier has been the central symbol of American military dominance in Iranian strategic consciousness. The weapon system that Iranian military planners have spent 3 decades studying, wargaming against, and developing capabilities to threaten. The IRGC's anti-ship missile program, its fast attack boat swarm doctrine, its anti-access and area denial strategy built around shore-based missile batteries, its development of ballistic missiles with maneuvering reentry vehicles specifically designed to strike moving ships at sea. All of it was constructed with one primary target in mind: the carrier. Not because Iran believed it could sink an American carrier and survive the response, but because the ability to credibly threaten a carrier, to demonstrate that the symbol of American invincibility is vulnerable, has a deterrent value that Iran calculated was worth decades of investment and the enormous risk of actually using the capability. Today, Iran used it, and it worked. The partial intercept achieved by the Ford's air defense system is simultaneously reassuring and deeply alarming to naval strategists who are now analyzing every detail of this engagement. It is reassuring because the SM-6 interceptor did achieve a hit. The missile's terminal guidance worked, the intercept geometry was correct, and the engagement occurred at the expected range. The system performed as designed. It is alarming because performing as designed was not sufficient to prevent a hit. The Kheibar Shekan's maneuvering re-entry vehicle, which executes course corrections in the final seconds of terminal descent to defeat predictive intercept algorithms, was effective enough in this engagement that the first SM-6 missed entirely, and the second achieved only a partial kill. Naval weapons engineers call this a threshold penetration. an engagement where the defense system operates within its designed parameters, but the offensive system has reached a capability level that makes clean interception probabilistic rather than certain. What this means in practical terms is that a ship as well defended as the USS Gerald R. Ford, operating in a high-threat environment with its full combat systems active and its crew at maximum readiness, can be hit by an Iranian ballistic missile. That sentence, 3 hours ago, would have been considered a theoretical possibility. It is now an established operational fact. The immediate military situation around the Ford is this. The carrier strike group, which includes the guided missile cruiser USS Lady Gulf and 5 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, has moved to a defensive perimeter formation around the damaged carrier. Aviation operations have ceased. The Ford's nuclear reactors are operating normally, and there is no radiological hazard. Damage control teams have contained the aviation fuel fire to the forward elevator area and are making progress on suppression, though the structural damage to the forward elevator mechanism means the carrier cannot conduct flight operations even if the fire is fully extinguished within the next several hours. 11 sailors are confirmed dead, 37 are injured, of whom 9 are listed in critical condition in the ship's medical facilities. The Ford is proceeding under its own power at reduced speed toward the nearest Allied port capable of conducting emergency repairs, which means a transit of the Suez Canal and a movement toward the American naval base at Rota, Spain. A journey of approximately 4 days at the reduced speed the carrier's damage control priorities currently dictate. For those 4 days, the most powerful warship in the world is essentially a wounded vessel moving away from the fight it was sent to influence. Here's the decision that President of the United States faces right now, and here is why it is genuinely the most consequential military decision an American president has faced since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The strike on the Ford was unambiguous. Iran's state media confirmed it within 40 minutes. The IRGC Aerospace Force issued a formal statement claiming the operation, identifying the weapon used, and stating that the strike was conducted in response to American military support for Israeli operations against Iranian territory. There is no ambiguity about attribution, no question of proxy distance, no deniability that Iran could claim even if it wanted to. Iran fired a ballistic missile at an American aircraft carrier, killed American sailors, and announced to the world that it did so deliberately and with the authorization of the supreme leadership. The American response cannot be nothing. An American president who absorbs a direct Iranian strike on a carrier battle group without a military response has ended American credibility as a security guarantor for every ally and partner on Earth. The message that non-response sends to Taipei, to Seoul, to Warsaw, to Riyadh, to Tokyo is not nuanced, it is catastrophic. If America does not respond to the killing of its sailors on its most powerful warship, the American security guarantee is finished as a functional instrument of international relations. But the response that political logic demands and the response that military logic recommends are not the same response. Military logic, applied to the specific situation that American Central Command is now working through, recommends a response that is proportionate in scale, precise in targeting, and designed to inflict maximum damage on Iranian military capability while minimizing the risk of escalation to a general war. That means strikes on the IRGC Aerospace Force installations from which the missile was launched. It means strikes on the production facilities where Kheibar Shekan missiles are manufactured and stored. It means strikes on the command and control infrastructure that authorized and executed the operation. All of these targets are on Iranian soil. All of them have been on American targeting lists for years. American forces have the intelligence, the weapons, and the operational plans to strike all of them within hours. The military problem is not capability. The military problem is what Iran does after those strikes land. And the answer, based on Iranian strategic doctrine, Iranian public statements, and the logic of regime survival that has governed every decision the Islamic Republic has made for 45 years, is that Iran responds against American bases across the Gulf, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Iraq, with the full weight of its ballistic missile arsenal, against targets where tens of thousands of American service members are stationed, and where the force protection situation against mass missile salvos is significantly worse than the USS Gerald R. Ford's. The nuclear dimension of this crisis, which was theoretical 48 hours ago and is operational reality today, must now be addressed directly. Iran does not possess a functional nuclear weapon. The Israeli strike on Fordo set back its weapons-grade enrichment program by an estimated 18 months to 3 years, depending on the extent of the structural damage that is still being assessed. But Iran has made explicit, in statements from the Supreme Leader and from the IRGC commander issued in the hours since the Ford strike, that if the United States conducts large-scale military strikes on Iranian territory, Iran will take whatever steps are necessary to ensure its own survival and the survival of the Islamic Republic. Intelligence analysts interpret that phrase, whatever steps are necessary, as a reference to Iran's residual nuclear weapons development capacity, to its chemical weapons stockpile. which has never been fully declared or destroyed, and most immediately to its ability to activate every remaining proxy and partner network it controls to strike American interests globally, not just regionally. A confined military exchange between the United States and Iran is possible in theory. In practice, the escalation architecture that Iran has spent 40 years constructing makes confinement extremely difficult to guarantee. The international response has followed the pattern every crisis of this magnitude follows: rapid public statements, urgent private consultations, and a scramble by every government to position itself against a developing situation whose trajectory is genuinely unknown. NATO's Secretary General convened an emergency North Atlantic Council consultation within 90 minutes. Article 5 does not automatically apply to American naval forces operating outside NATO's geographic area of responsibility, but the political solidarity dimension of the alliance is fully activated. Britain and France will support American military action politically and with intelligence contributions. Germany will support politically, but with significant reservations about escalation. Turkey, occupying the most complex position of any NATO ally given its relationships with both Iran and Russia, will extract maximum concessions from Washington as the price of its cooperation. The global energy market reaction has been immediate and severe. Brent crude, which was already trading above $100 per barrel following the Aramco strikes, moved to $162 in the first hour of trading after the Ford strike was confirmed. The move reflects not merely the direct disruption to Gulf energy flows, but the market's assessment of the probability that American military strikes on Iranian territory trigger a full Iranian closure of the Strait of Hormuz as the asymmetric economic weapon that Iran reaches for when conventional military options are foreclosed. Every previous analysis of what full Hormuz closure means for global energy markets now applies simultaneously with an active military confrontation between the United States and Iran. The two scenarios that energy security analysts always modeled separately, military escalation and Hormuz closure, are now developing in parallel. The combined effect on oil prices, on inflation, on economic growth in every oil importing nation on Earth is not the sum of the two separate scenarios. It is something larger and more severe than either model was designed to calculate. What happens in the next 6 hours will be the hinge of this crisis. The Ford's crew is fighting fires and counting its dead. The White House Situation Room is running targeting options and escalation models simultaneously. Iran's leadership is waiting to see whether the strike that just killed 11 American sailors produces the response that demonstrates American vulnerability or the response that triggers the war Iran has always known might come. Every government in the Gulf, in Europe, and in Asia is watching a situation that has moved in the space of 72 hours from regional conflict to a direct military confrontation between the United States and Iran over the body of a damaged aircraft carrier in the eastern Mediterranean. The $13 billion that the USS Gerald R cost to build purchased the world's most powerful conventional military deterrent. Today, that deterrent was tested, and the test produced a result that nobody who ordered that carrier to sea was prepared to accept as possible.